Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're really glad you're here. This podcast is designed for you to understand the assessment in the affective domain. And now, here's your host, Miss Princess Erica de la Cruz. Our podcast will be having 9 episodes to discuss by future educators, and it's being a great pleasure to interview these amazing individuals. We have Miss May Ann Villamin, Miss Cristel May Hurtado, Miss Christine Joyce Malyari, Mr. Mike Julius Napiza, Miss Melissa Cunanan, Miss Sunshine Tapang, Mr. Baron Mangino, Miss Josephine Pedelino, Mr. Gilbert Opresio, and Miss Katrina Santiago. Now, let's begin. Let's welcome our first guest, Miss May Ann Villamin, to explain the taxonomy in the affective domain.
Hi, Miss Erica. I want to share about taxonomy in the affective domain, which I know will help my fellow student to better understand the taxonomy in the affective domain. The affective domain addresses the feelings, emotions, behaviors, and attitude of the learners. Previously, the educationers did not encourage emotionalism in education. They believed that learning affected only in the intellectual level of a learner and had nothing to do with the learner's emotions, interests, and impulses. But today, they agree that learners' feelings and emotions are equally important in our education. The affective domain was one of the 3 systems published in 1956 for identifying, understanding, and addressing of how people learn. A detailed study of the affective domain was published in 1965 in Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, which is in the book 2, Affective Domain by Cratwell, Bloom, and others. Cratwell is attributed as the primary author of this book, as cells in Glasgow point out that taxonomy is ordered according to the principle of internalization.
Wow, that was a great explanation, Miss Villamin. So now, what is internalization?
Good question, Miss Erica. So now, here it is. Internalization is a process where a person moves from a general awareness of a topic to where the change is internalized and guides the character or the behavior of a person. According to Cratwell, like cognitive objectives, affective objectives can also be divided into a hierarchy.
Oh, that Ratwell taxonomy is very interesting, Miss Villamin.
Yes, it is, as this area is concerned with feelings or emotions and also the social or emotional learning skills. The taxonomy is a range from simpler feeling to those that are more complex.
I have a question, Miss Villamin. Is the affective domain is divided into major classes?
Yes, of course, the affective domain is divided into 5 major classes of objectives. These are the behavioral abilities that lead to the information of attitude. These are the following. First one, we have receiving. The second one is responding. Third one is valuing. Fourth one is organization. And the last one is the characterization.
Thank you so much, Miss Villamin, for that very informative discussion. We appreciate you. And now let's have Miss Cristel May Hurtado to share with us what Rares book means, and this topic also under in the taxonomy in the affective domain.
Hello, Miss Princess. So now we're going to talk about the affective domain by David Cratwell. His taxonomy is a model that describes how the individuals process and internalize learning objects on an affective or emotional level. Here are the 5 levels of Cratwell's taxonomy, and for better memorization, just use the mnemonic RERESVOC. RE stands for receiving, RES for responding, V is for valuing, D is for organizing, and C is for characterization. First one is receiving. This is the lowest level of the learning outcomes in the affective domain. It means the willingness or ability to receive information and to be attentive. Receiving has three sub-levels, and these are the awareness, willingness, and controlled or selected attention. Coming to the first one, that is awareness. Awareness involves the conscious recognition of the existence of some problem or a situation. Like for example, when a teacher comes into a noisy class, there will be a sudden change in the class atmosphere.
Why would that happen?
This is because the students have become aware of the presence of the teacher. They are aware. This is because the students have become aware of the presence of the teacher. They are aware. The second one is willingness. This is the next stage, which involves the ability to acknowledge the problem or a situation instead of ignoring or avoiding it. Like for example, when the teacher comes in, the students in the class keep quiet. It is because they notice and acknowledge the presence of the teacher, and if they had ignored her presence, they would have continued to make noise in the class. The third one is controlled or selected attention. This involves the learner selecting or choosing to pay attention to situation. Like for example, when a teacher teaches in the class, the learner is aware of what the teacher is saying. The student will deliberately shut off any other distractions around him. So the subdomain receiving in a classroom situation involves holding and directing the attention of the learners to whatever the teacher has to say in the class. Okay, now there are some examples of receiving. Number 1, listening to others with respect. Listening for and remembering the names of newly introduced people. And also, there are some verbs that relate to this function, like for example, asked, chooses, describes, follows, gives, holds, identifies, replies, selects, or uses. The second one is responding. Here, the learner responds to the events by participating. The learner attends and reacts to a particular phenomenon. The learner shows interest and actively participates in the learning activity. So the learning outcomes in this subdomain may emphasize compliance in responding, willingness to respond, and satisfaction and response. First one, compliance in responding, which involves simple obedience or compliance. Second one, willingness to respond. This involves voluntary responses to a given situation. The third one, satisfaction and response, corresponds to the satisfaction a learner attains when he responds to a learning activity. So there are some examples of responding. Number 1, the student participates in class discussions. The student gives a presentation. The student is able to question new ideas, concepts, models, etc. in order to fully understand them and knows the safety rules and practice them. And also, there are some verbs that relate to this function, like for example, answers, assists, aids, complies, conforms, helps, labels, performs, practices, and etc. The third one is valuing, and here the individuals set guidelines for controlling their own behavior. Valuing is related to the worth or value a learner attaches to a particular object, phenomenon, behavior, or situation. This ranges in a degree from a desire to improve group skills to a commitment to assume responsibility for the effective functioning of group. So there are three sub-levels of valuing. First one is acceptance of a value. Second one is preference for a value. And third one is commitment to a value. The first one is acceptance. This is a situation where the learner believes tentatively in a doctrine, condition, or situation. The second one is preference for a value. In this case, the learner believes in the necessity of a particular condition or doctrine. He ignores other alternatives and deliberately looks for other people's views on controversial issues so as to form his own opinion. And last is the commitment. In this stage, the learner is convinced and fully committed to the doctrine, principle, or course. In consequence, the learner internalizes a set of specific values, and these values can be seen in his behavior, attitude, and appreciation. There are some examples of valuing. Number 1, the learner demonstrates belief in the democratic process. The learner is sensitive towards individual and cultural differences, or he values diversity. The learner is able to solve problems. The learner proposes a plan for social improvement and follows through with a commitment. And last, the learner informs the management on matters that one feels strongly about. Also, there are some verbs that are related to this function, like for example, completes, demonstrates, differentiates, explains, follows, forms, initiates, and etc. Next one is organization. This refers to the learner's internalization of values and beliefs. Here, the learner starts to bring together different values as an organized system. He determines the interrelationship by comparing, relating, and synthesizing the values. So, there are two sub-levels of organization, and these are the conceptualization of a value and organization of value system. The first one, that is conceptualization, involves the understanding of the relationship of abstract elements of a value or acceptance of a new value. The second one, that is organization, involves the development of a complex value system, and this leads the individual to develop a philosophy of life which helps him to avoid dependence upon others, especially to avoid a situation where one becomes a public nuisance. The individual recognizes the need for balance between freedom and responsible behavior. The examples of organization includes the learner accepts responsibility for one's behavior. He explains the role of systematic planning in solving problems. The learner accepts professional ethical standards. The learner creates a life plan in harmony with abilities, interests, and beliefs. And last, the learner prioritizes time effectively to meet the needs of the organization, family, and self. So the examples of verbs that relates to these functions are the following: adheres, alters, arrange, combines, compares, completes, defends, explains, formulates, and etc. And now, the last level is characterization by value set. This is the highest level in attitude formation. Here, the person acts consistently in accordance with these values, beliefs, or ideals according to his philosophy of life. A lifestyle that reflects these beliefs and philosophy is developed. The behavior of such individuals or groups is controlled by the value system. Here, it is possible to predict with accuracy how an individual would behave or respond. So there are two levels here. The first one is generalized set, and the second one is characterization. The first one is generalized set, involves a situation where the orientation of the individual enables him to act consistently and effectively in a complex environment. The individual revises his judgments and changes his behavior as a result of available, new, and valid evidence. The second one is characterization. In this case, the learner is consistently acting in harmony with a value system. The value system regulates the learner's personal civil life according to a code of behavior based on ethical principles. So there are some examples internalizing values. Number 1, the learner shows self-reliance when working independently. The learner cooperates in group activities when he displays teamwork. The learner uses an objective approach to problem solving. The learner displays a professional commitment to ethical practice on a daily basis. The learner revises his judgments and changes his behavior in light of new evidence. Last, the learner values people for what they are and not how they look. And also, there are some examples of verbs that relates to this function. Like for example, acts, discriminates, displays, influences, listens, modifies, performs, practices, proposes, and etc. So these are the characteristics of the affective domain. There are educationists who believe that the primary goals of learning are affective. They are of the opinion that learners should not learn what is selected for them by others. This defies learners' own feelings and emotions.
What is the important role of a good teacher?
The primary goal of a good teacher is to help students learn. It is an important role of a good teacher to make students feel good about their efforts to learn and their success in learning. This will help to create a balance and interdependence between the cognitive and the affective processes of learning.
Thank you so much, Miss Hurtado. You are appreciated to the knowledge that you shared. Now let's have Miss Christine Joyce Mariari to share her knowledge about the affective in learning competencies. Hi, Miss Mariari.
Good day, everyone. So, now we will be talking about the effective learning competencies. So, first, it is true that as educators or as future educator, our aim is not just only to impact knowledge, attitudes, and skills, but also to impact the daily behavior of our students, right? So, according to the statement by Nikis, it is targeted to aim for the core values of our learners and how they behave. Effective desired learning competencies are often stated in the form of instructional objectives. So when we say instructional objectives, these are specific, measurable, short-term, and observable students' behavior. We all know that objectives are the foundation upon which teachers can build lessons and assessments that can prove and meet overall course or lesson goals. Thus, the lesson for the effective learning competency should be as much as possible relatable to the world. Why? Because teachers should create the most meaningful learning to the closest extent and to let his or her learners use it as a means in their daily lives. However, using the affective domain to select targeted teaching techniques might help foster development of key beliefs and values that underlie the advanced competencies.
But then, Miss Mariari, how can teacher execute techniques or strategies using the affective domain?
So, executing this strategy may take some time and effort on the part of the teacher because, first and foremost, the teacher should prepare ahead of time to make the topic as easy to comprehend as possible. In his or her lesson plan, the teacher should give out a positive impact or motivation as he or she starts his class. That way, the students would find the lesson memorable and will create meaning toward their learning. The teacher should then remember to create a balance of objectives in regarding the psychomotor and cognitive objectives. This way, the students will be equipped with the proper know-how on how to perform their tasks, may it be in grammar or in literature. So, after putting up specific objectives, delivering meaningful motivation, and delivering comprehensible lessons, the teacher should proceed on with the affective domain, the part in which we have discussed that gives students the need to use the lesson at hand. So, through this, there will be a deep connection with the topic and the students' lives. Like, for example, instead of just basically teaching the topic literacy devices in a traditional way, it would be much preferable to reinforce it with an affective activity or agreement. They would be instead tasked to write a poem for their loved ones or even describe their family using simile or metaphorical phrases. So, in this way, there will be an emotional band that will be tied to the student's knowledge to a certain topic. And also, by giving the students the need to why they should study, evaluate, and reflect on their lessons will be the most effective and holistic way in learning.
Why do we need this? How does motivation affect student learning?
So it is important, and we can spark the motivation within the student to push their boundaries within that certain topic on their own self-driven motivation. So in traditional setting, which we also call the banking concept of education, I know we are all familiar with this, in which the students are just merely being deposited with historical, linguistic, and scientific facts. So this process is somewhat dull and empty in the perspective of the students, and unfortunately, this concept pushes them to cope up and memorize the topics just for the sake of passing a particular subject. So, in contrary with that, in applying the effective learning competency, the teacher would tap onto the personal schema or various stimuli in order for the students to have a connection with the topic at hand. So, if we go back to behaviorism, it is said that a person or even an animal can be trained under a condition where there should be a reinforcement for that schema to be embedded deeply. So, these schemas are considered the learning, and the stimuli are considered the effective instructions the teachers are willing to imply. And lastly, we must keep in mind that no matter how intelligent, talented, or witty your students are, if they cannot apply and value the learnings that they have, it would be meaningless and they cannot improve their affective skills.
It was a great explanation, Miss Malyari. Thank you for your time and effort. You are appreciated. Let's have Mr. Mike Julius Napiza to share his knowledge regarding to focal concepts.
Good day, everyone. We all know, guys, that affective domain involves our feelings, emotions, and attitudes, and includes the manner in which we deal with things emotionally, our feelings, values, appreciation, enthusiasm, motivations, and attitudes. Now, in the affective domain, and in particular, when we consider learning competencies, we also consider the following focal concepts, which is my topic for this time. First is attitudes. It is defined as mental predisposition to act that it expressed by evaluating a particular entity with some degree of favor or disfavor. Individuals generally have attitudes that focus on objects, people, or institutions. Attitudes are also attached to mental categories. Mental orientations towards concepts are generally referred to as values, and attitudes are comprised of four components. First is cognitions. When we say cognitions, it is our beliefs, theories, expectancies, cause and effect beliefs, and perceptions relative to the focal object. This concept is not the same as feelings, but just a statement of beliefs and expectations which vary from one individual to the next. Second component is affect. It is refers to our feelings with respect to the focal objects such as fear, liking, or anger. For instance, The color blue evokes different feelings for different individuals. Some like the color blue but others do not. Some associate the color blue with loneliness while others associate it with calmness and peace. Third is behavioral intentions. It is our goals, aspirations, and our expected responses to the attitude or object. Last component is evaluation. It is often considered the central component of attitudes. Evaluations consist of the imputation of some degree of goodness or badness to an attitude object. For example, when we speak of a positive or negative attitude toward an object, we are referring to the evaluative component. Evaluations are a function of cognition, affect, and behavioral intentions of the object. It is most often the evaluation that is stored in memory, often without the corresponding cognitions and affect that were responsible for its formation. Second focal concept is motivation. So when we say motivation, it is a reason or a set of reasons for engaging in a particular behavior, especially human behavior, as studied in psychology and neuropsychology. The reason may include basic needs, for example, food, water, shelter, or an object, goal, state of being, or ideal that is desirable which may or may not be viewed as positive, such as seeking a state of being in which pain is absent. The motivation for a behavior may also be attributed to less apparent reasons such as altruism or morality. According to Jean, 1995, motivation refers to the initiation, direction, intensity, and persistence of human behavior. There are many theories that explain human motivation. The need theory is one of these theories, or Abraham Maslow hierarchy of human needs theory that we'll discuss after.
Sir Mike, what do you think the reason why we need to study attitudes?
Thank you for that question, Miss De La Cruz. Obviously, attitudes can influence the way we act and think in the social communities we belong. They can function as frameworks and references for forming conclusions and interpreting or acting for or against an individuals, a concept, or an idea. For instance, think about your attitudes toward drinking alcoholic beverages or gambling or going on a all-night bar shopping spree every night. Or perhaps think about your attitude towards mathematics and mathematical equations.
My second question is, do these attitudes shape the way you think and correspondingly act? What is your response? How is your response informed by each of these attitudes?
The answer is in the several studies in the past, for instance, concluded the poor performance in the school mathematics cannot be strictly attributed to differential mental abilities, but to the students' attitudes toward the subject. So when mathematics classes are recited, students with negative attitude towards mathematics tend to pay less attention and occupy their minds with something else. Thus, attitudes may influence behavior. People will behave in ways consistent with their attitudes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Napiza. You enlightened our confusion. Thank you again, sir. Now let's welcome Miss Melissa Kunanan for her discussion about the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy. Hello, Miss Kunanan.
Hello everybody, we are done in the previous topic, which is the focal concepts when we consider learning competencies. Now let's talk about the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, the most widely discussed theory of motivation. Let's begin. Abraham Maslow was an American psychologist who first introduced his hierarchy of needs in a 1943 paper entitled A Theory of Human Motivation. Now the theory says, as human, our actions motivated by our desire to meet specific needs. Maslow's is subsequently extended the idea includes of his observations of humans' innate curiosity. You guys, when we talk about innate curiosity, ano ang unang pumapasok sa ating isipan? Yes, in simple term, it only defines the innate or born to be curious. Tayong mga tao ay born to be curious na we are curious sa mga bagay-bagay na nakikita natin, especially nung bata pa tayo. His theory identified 5 types of needs that need to fulfill in order for you to be cheerful potential. Now the 5 needs come in a particular order. Only one set of needs is satisfied. Will you think you've meeting the next set of needs in a hierarchy? Now, let's jump into the pyramid of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The bottom part is the physiological needs, and the top is the self-actualization. First, the physiological needs, where it is a concept that we derive to explain and cultivate the foundation of our motivation. This concept is the main physical requirement for human survival. This means the physiological needs are universal human needs. It is the internal motivation according to Abraham Maslow. Ang pwede nating tandaan dito ay ang words na universal basic needs natin as an individual. These are the things that we simply cannot live without, like the air, food, drink, warmth, sleep, and shelter.
So what will happen if these needs are not achieved?
Then, if these needs are not achieved, it leads to increase of displeasure within an individual. Nababawasan ang motivation natin kasi hindi na-meet ang basic needs natin. We feel displeasure. Ito yung feeling of irritation, annoyance, disapproval. For example, ang isang estudyante ay gutom. Maaring hindi siya makapag-focus sa mga pinag-aaralan nila dahil nga gutom siya. Mas mabilis siyang mairita o mainis. Minsan sila pa yung hindi mo makausap ng maayos kasi nga gutom sila. And also the other example is that, for instance, among teenagers, sleep deprivation has become the norm rather than the exemption, with surveys reporting between 50% and 90% of teenagers failing to meet the basic physiological need, where physiological needs are the needs that everyone must have met before they can worry about anything else. Without fulfilling one's physiological needs, the body will break down and people will die. Then let's proceed to the next level, which is the safety and security needs. This is about physical safety, such as protection from violence, but also about financial security, freedom from accidents, and the security of easily accessible healthcare. Our safety needs dominate our behavior. These refer to the need for security and protection. We all have the basic need to feel safe. Ang tatandaan natin dito ay ang words na feel safe. Kasi 'di ba, lahat naman tayo bilang tao may mga pangangailangan tayo na gusto natin ng kaayusan, na gusto at dapat ramdam natin na ligtas tayo sa lahat ng bagay, na secured at safe tayo like from war, natural disaster, family violence, child abuse at iba pa. This level is predominant in children as they generally have greater need to feel safe. The examples are personal security, wherein nakapaloob dito ang ating karapatang pantao, and also the emotional security and the financial or economic security, wherein here it is a condition of having a stable income or the resources to support our standard of living now and in the near future. So yes, ang pera ay parte po ng ating pangangailangan, but that is more under the safety and security. Ano pang mga halimbawa? Like against the accident and illness, gusto natin na makaiwas tayo sa sakit o namang sakuna at aksidente. And that is part of our safety and security. This level is about keeping ourselves safe from harm. If a person doesn't feel safe in an environment, they will seek to find safety before they attempt to meet in any higher level of needs. But having this need met isn't just about living in a safe country with good social norms. Workplace or schoolyard bullying, for instance, can mean that your safety needs are not met. The other level is the social belongingness and love needs. According to Maslow, human possesses an affective needs for sense of belonging and acceptance among social group regardless whether these groups are large and small. When we talk about social belongingness, pwede nating tandaan dito is yung feeling or the need to be loved and be loved. Yes, humans are social creatures that crave interaction with others. This level of the hierarchy outlines the needs for friendship, intimacy, family, and love. Mafufulfill ang love and belongingness natin as individual sa pamamagitan ng mga taong nakapaligid sa atin like ang ating family, circle of friends, partners in life, and so on. Humans have need to give and receive love to feel like they belong in a group.
But what will happen if your love and belongingness need is not achieved?
If this need is not achieved, many people suffer from loneliness, anxiety, like takot silang makihalubilo sa ibang tao, and worse pa doon ay ang pagkakaroon nila ng depression. Especially nowadays, there are some people tend to use social media to share their thoughts and feelings rather than to talk to someone else. As an individual, mahalaga sa atin na ma-feel natin na part tayo ng isang family, social groups, or community, and everyone deserves to feel loved and wanted. Like what the psychologists recognize that meeting the social belongingness and love needs is one of the keys to have a better mental health. Then the next level is self-esteem needs. It encompasses confidence, strength, self-belief, personal and social acceptance, and respect from others. These needs are represented as one of the key stages in achieving contentedness or self-actualization. When we talk about self-esteem needs, ang pwede nating tandaan dito ay yung ego and status needs na may kinalaman sa pagiging moral natin. Kasi 'di ba, wala naman tao na gusto na lagi siyang binabastos, na lagi siyang hinaharas, 'di ba? Na everybody needs to have self-esteem and respect. At sabi nga sa quote, respect begets respect. In order to earn respect for yourself, you also need to respect the others. There are two forms of esteem, the lower and the higher form, wherein the lower form is the need for the esteem of others. We need our colleagues, peers, and friends to respect us and the work we do, to value our contribution to society. However, the higher form of esteem is self-esteem or self-respect. It's higher because people with self-esteem still have their need for esteem met, even in circumstances that others around them don't respect them.
But what will happen if your self-esteem need is not met?
If this need is not achieved, of course, dito ka na magkakaroon ng insecurity sa sarili mo, like sa katawan mo, sa buhok mo, at ito na yung moment na mararamdaman mo na you are not good enough, na every time iniisip mo na may kulang sa'yo. Kaya sometimes, nagli-lead ito sa depression. Nagiging mababa yung tingin mo sa sarili mo, and this is too bad, especially sa mga students na may history from anxiety and depression. Being without either kind of esteem can leave you feeling useless, helpless, or inferior. The need for belonging and the need for esteem are classed as the physiological needs. Lastly, the top level in the pyramid is the self-actualization, and this level of needs refers to the realization to one's full potential. Maslow described this as the desire to accomplish everything that one can to become the most and the one can be. Maslow also believed that in order to achieve this state of personal fulfillment, the person must first satisfy the preceding needs. When we talk about self-actualization, ang pwede nating tandaan dito is the realization of one's full potential. Like what Abraham Maslow says, what a man can be, he must be. This need we call self-actualization. Ito na yung fulfillment of your full potential as a person. This was the highest spot in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The self-actualization needs includes education, skill development, refining of talents such as music, athletics, painting, cooking, and others. Like for example, you are a student, and then you graduated to your chosen course. With that, you accomplish the most fulfilling potential as a student. Dito mo na-reach yung pinakahihintay mo na desire bilang estudyante. You are able to find the meaning and purpose of your life. broadly, it's about fulfilling the full extent of your own potential across all the areas that are personally important to you. It's about not depending on the opinions of others, but about knowing what matters most to you, achieving it, and finding satisfaction in that. And that is the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs.
Thank you so much, Miss Konanan, for the very detailed discussion. Highly appreciated. Now let's welcome Miss Tapang to explain what does Herberg's theory about.
Herzberg's theory is another neat theory of motivation. So si Frederick Herzberg explained that the factors that motivate individuals through identifying and satisfying their individual needs, desires, and the aims pursued to satisfy their desires. This theory of motivation is known as the two-factor content theory.
What are the two factors in Herberg's theory?
So we have two factors in Herberg's theory, which is the motivators and the hygiene factors. So the meaning of motivators is which give positive satisfaction, and on the other hand, the hygiene factors is which do not motivate if present but if absent will result in demotivation. In addition, the name hygiene factor is used because like hygiene, the presence will make you healthier, but absence can cause health deterioration. The theory is sometimes called the motivator hygiene theory. From a practical point of view, Herberg's two-factor theory has proven more powerful than Maslow since its concepts are simpler to understand.
Thank you very much, Miss Tapang. We really appreciate you, ma'am. Now let's have Mr. Mangino to discuss another theory, which is the ERG theory of motivation. Hello, sir.
Now, the model was developed by an American psychologist, Clayton Alderfer. You may think that this model is the simplified version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The ERG theory stands for Existence, Relatedness, and Growth. Ngayon, etong tatlong to, kailangan nilang mag-gratify in order for the person or yung child to be motivated. So, una yung existence. Dito na papasok yung mga basic needs or most likely mga kailangan natin sa buhay like tubig, kain, security, tsaka mga healthcare. Now, kung i-relate natin to sa mga student, example na lang tayo bilang college student, tas eto nga pandemic, online class, tanong ko lang, mamomotivate ka bang mag-aral kung wala yung mga bagay na kailangan mong aral para sa online class? Wala kang cellphone na maayos, wala kang laptop, tsaka internet. Motivate ka pa ba? Umpisa ka na mag-doubt or mag-alanganin kung survive mo ba yung academic year na walang gamit. Pero nung point na dumating na may gamit ka na, somehow, you became motivated. Like, nakasabay na ako sa klase ng maayos. Na-activate na yung good behavior mo. And as a response, you are going to do something good. Next is relatedness. This one is our need to relate to other people. Papasok na dyan yung pakikitungo natin, relasyon natin sa mga ibang tao. And take note, having a good relation and interaction sa mga ibang tao is a need that we all share. Although, itong relatedness need na to is not quite strong as our basic needs. Siguro bilang estudyante, bilang tao, ayaw nyo rin yung feeling na mag-isa. Sa school na lang. Ang hirap na walang kaibigan, walang kasama sa lunch break, walang kasama tumawa, walang kapalitan ng ideas, walang kakopyahan. Kaya tayo bilang future educators, let us encourage or let us build a safe environment kung saan feel nila na belong sila. Like, papagawa ka ng activities mo na more on collaboration, by groups, ganyan, para makapag-build ng connection yung mga students mo. So, dun pala, masasatisfy na yung needs of relation ng bawat isa sa mga students mo. Magiging mas motivated sila mag-aral. And finally, growth. Growth refers to our need for personal development. Kung saan, dito, magiging creative ka na and mas bibigay ka ng effort sa mga meaningful work. Ngayon, makakarating ka lang sa stage na to kapag nasatisfy mo na both yung existence and yung relatedness. Na kontento ka na sa mga bagay na kailangan mo, kontento ka na sa mga taong kasama mo. Dito napapasok yung, I have to be better. Para maging consistent yung pagkakakontento mo. Ngayon, self-motivation na yan. Now, to sum up, the three needs must be satisfied in order for an individual to be motivated, and that is the existence, relatedness, and growth. And finally, for us as future educators, we can use this theory that conditions our class to allow each students to be motivated as they can. So that is it. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mangino. That was a great explanation. We appreciate you, sir. Now let's proceed to Ms. Josephine Pedelino to discuss about the development of assessment tools as well as the self-report and checklist. Now let's proceed to Ms. Josephine Pedelino to discuss about the development of assessment tools as well as the self-report and checklist.
I wanted to share the development of assessment tools under affective domain. So as we proceed, we consider few of the standard assessment tools in the affective domain, and today I will going to discuss two assessment tools in affective domain, and in particular those which are used to assess attitudes, interests, motivations, and self-efficacy have been developed. So there are certain good practices that are considered good practices in developing this instrument. First, we have the self-report, wherein it is the most common measurement tool in the affective domain. It essentially requires an individual to provide an account of his attitude or feelings towards a concept, idea, or people. And it is also called as written reflections.
How can this be executed within the classroom?
In using this measurement tool, it can be executed within the classroom when the teacher requires the students, for example, to write their own thoughts, feelings on a subject matter. For instance, they are going to write why they get bored when they are in the social studies class, wherein the teacher will ensure that the students will write something which would demonstrate the various levels of the taxonomy. So these levels are from the lowest level, the receiving, responding, valuing, organization, up to the characterization.
Yeah, that's right, Miss Pedelino, and thank you for that comprehensive content which can be applied as a tool in assessing affective domain.
Indeed, I'm also glad that I have a chance to impart this kind of subject matter to our dear listeners. And moreover, we have the checklist. This is the second one. It is also included, which is somehow the easiest instrument in affective domain to construct. So this kind of checklist consists of simple items only that the teacher can mark. For example, the teacher can mark absent or present. So I'll give some steps in structure of a checklist. First, enumerate all the attributed and characteristics you wish to observe relative to the concept being measured. For instance, if the concept is interpersonal relation, then you might want to identify those indicators or attributes which constitute an evidence of good interpersonal relation. And then you ask the students to mark those attributes or characteristics which are present and to leave blank those which are not. For example, a teacher is planning to have an observation or getting students' attention as a goal of the teacher for a week. Therefore, you're going to list all the activities that can use in order to get attention of the students. So first, ask interesting questions or tell them a story. The second one, try to be playful and have relation to them. And add some icebreakers like games examples Mr. Bax. And the fourth one, use visual signs or signals like raising your hand, which means a student's mouth should be closed and should listen to you. So, through this, it will serve as the checklist of a teacher that could help to observe the student's attention if they are responsive or not.
Thank you for imparting these kinds of tools, Miss Pedelino. But my question is, do you think these kinds of tools can be effective ways even we are in the new set of learning which is online class? How can we build interpersonal relations?
Thank you for that question, and it is quite challenging to apply this kind of tool with this kind of situation and questionable if these tools can be effective. However, we as educators and the students as well should reach each other to make things work effectively. So as teacher, we should think of some ways like having online kumustahan and some icebreakers that will help our students to get to know each other and will let them think that we can make it with unity. Moreover, it will build interconnections that would let them feel included, and this will be the time to manifest the no child left behind, especially in this crisis, the pandemic. So, therefore, we should allow them sometimes to have mental break before they experience the mental breakdown.
Yeah, that's right. Again, we are glad to have you here in this episode, Miss Josephine Pedelino. Thank you.
It is a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this. God bless and thank you so much.
Also about another tool in the affective domain, let's have Mr. Gilbert Apresio. Shalom to you, sir. So what is a rating scale?
A rating scale is a common method of data collection that is used to gather comparative information. It is a tool used for assessing the performance of tasks, skill levels, procedures, processes, qualities, quantities, or end products. In addition, a rating scale is like a survey questions used to represent responded feedback. Unlike checklists, rating scale can provide both quantitative and qualitative information that is convenient in affective domain for assessing attitudes, behaviors, interests, and more. So there are different examples of rating scale, such semantic differential scale and Tersone scale. Let's first define and explain semantic differential scale.
What is semantic differential scale?
A semantic differential scale is a survey or questionnaire rating scale that asks individual to rate a specific thing. Semantic differential scale is measure and assess individual attitudes towards something. An example of semantic differential scale question is please rate school. Then you can indicate if it's interesting or boring arranged in numbers like 1 is boring and 5 is interesting. And if you choose the middle number, which is 3, means that your feeling towards school is neutral, and that is semantic differential scale. Another example of rating scale is Tersone scale. So
what is Thurston scale?
the Tersone scale measure how favorable a responded regards to an issue by using series of agree, disagree that includes number of levels on how favorable the responded. Terstone's scale was developed by Louis Leon Thurstone in 1928, and perhaps it is the reason where its name derives. An example of Terstone's scale question is we should now be a pro-choice than being a pro-life. Then you answer from 1 to 10, 1 being agree to the statement and 9 being disagree. And that is Terstone's scale.
Thank you so much, Mr. Opresio. Actually, I encountered those skills that you tackled when I was on my junior high school journey. Anyways, we appreciate you, sir. Let's have Miss Katrina Santiago. So, Miss Kat, aside from the common examples of rating skills that Gilbert have been given, can you still give us more examples?
Yes, of course. The Likert scale and Gatman scale. Francis Likert developed the method of summated ratings or the Likert scale in 1932. A Likert scale is an ordered scale from which respondents choose one option that best aligns with their view. It is often used to measure respondents' attitudes, behaviors, and perceptions by asking the extent to which they agree or disagree, satisfied and not satisfied with a particular questions or statements. For example, how satisfied are you with our discussion for today? You can choose your answer on the following choices like very dissatisfied, not satisfied, neutral, satisfied, and very satisfied. Next is the Gottman scale. Gottman scale, or sometimes called cumulative or scalegram scaling. So in 1944, Louis Gottman suggested that attitude should be measured by multidimensional scale. When we say multidimensional scale, it is the visual representation of similarities and dissimilarities between sets of objects. The major characteristic of Gottman scale is that the response to one item helps predict the response to the other items. The Gottman scale has a yes or no answers to a set of questions that increase in specificity. The idea is that a person will get to a certain point and then stop. For example, on a 5-point quiz, if a person gets to a question 3 and then stops, it implies that they do not agree with questions 4 and 5.
Thank you so much, Miss Kat. I do appreciate your effort by providing examples of rating skills. We appreciate you, ma'am. And now, if you enjoy this podcast, be sure to subscribe to be updated when the new episode is posted. Ring and review this podcast and share with your friends. Thank you for lending me your ears. Have a great day.